Speak Life, written by Alexander Paul on the 10th of November 2011. We talk life, not death. We still think because it's not illegal yet. We dream together, so we believe together. When dreams become reality, we achieve together. Let no eye cry for fear and sorrow, for we believe in a brighter tomorrow. And therefore better days are bound to follow. May our despair turn into hope. We will replace war with peace and hatred with the love. We will stop living on our knees and we will rise above the struggle, the pain and all of life's troubles. Negative words shall have no effect when positive actions continue. Happiness and laughter will solve any issue. We speak life until life no longer speaks to us. For better days shall follow today, and tomorrow will have an easier pathway. Good over evil, love over hatred, and life over death. Forever laughing until our last breath. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Family Podcast with your two favourite brothers. My name is Sammy.
My name is Don.
And welcome back, everyone. Today, as promised, is a special where we'll be looking over the life of a dear friend of ours, Alexander Paul.
So, Alexander King Paul, born on the 11th of the 10th, 1995. He sadly passed away after being diagnosed with a brain tumour that proved to be fatal and ended his life on the 3rd of June 2017. This episode is to commemorate his 5th anniversary, and we do have some guests on the show. His mother, Joanna, Noel, who's sitting next to me, and his friend Tyrell.
So I want to open up the conversation by asking first Don and then Noel, what is Alexander's life? What does it mean to you?
Wow. So Alexander's life was special. For those people who know me and Alexander as like kids, we were almost like fighting brothers, innit? Like he thought he was better than me at basketball. I thought I was better than him at basketball. You know, I was older, so I was like, no, you need to give me respect. And he was growing up, so he was like, nah, you need to give me respect before I respect you. And it was almost like an organic relationship. As we grew up, we started to really respect each other as our own individuals. Especially he was quite learned in Black African history and understanding a lot of literature, politics. And so we had many conversations about things like Stop and Search, generally around poetry. We both had a love for dance. So his life for me really was about a growing friendship. It was something that developed over time, and I really got to see someone grow into an adult that I admired, because I never admired him when he was younger. I just thought he was annoying, and he probably thought the same as me, you know. But as he grew, it was like, actually, this guy is smart. He was also someone who, you know, dabbled in arts, acting, and a number of other things. So yeah, his life was just like a beacon of light, and that as he grew, he got better and better with time, like a fine wine, isn't it? So we'll touch into some of the stuff that he did as we go through the episode, but you know, it really was a light that's hard to extinguish. And you know, 5 years on, we're still talking about him. You know, he's still recognised in a number of publications, a number of books, and also by the Conservative government. So yeah.
And no?
Oh, it's a big question, but he just meant a lot to me as a brother, as a friend, and just like you said, as a leader. I watched him grow into a leader over the time that he was here with us. I remember him being very young, having a lot of energy, and growing up, he always maintained that energy, but he just channeled it in different ways. So he used to get like very upset, like you said, when he's very competitive, like always wants to win. So he doesn't win, he's on your neck, you know, like getting angry. And I remember him just being really into, like you said, poetry and also dance. He loved Michael Jackson music differently. So yeah, he was just a very passionate person at everything he threw himself into. And I think that is a big part of the legacy that he left.
Because for me, it's weird because I always saw him as like even though he was significantly younger than me, I always saw him as my literary compadre. You know, like we had a lot of views about society. At that time, I was probably more left wing than I am now, but we still had a heart for people and society, and looking at the injustices of society and trying to pick those out, and where's my place in this, what problems can I help to solve, and that type of thing. And then we had these bonds with like writing and poetry and creation. We both, as young kids, read the dictionary, you know, and so we shared this kinship for the love of words and how words sound when they go together extremely well. So for me, it was really, I don't even know the words in it, but it was really humbling in a way to see him make his literary exploits, if that makes sense. Seeing him really not putting his poetry out there, but knowing he was writing, and then all of a sudden you're seeing him in Amsterdam and he's freestyling this spoken word.
I was like, where did this come from?
Like the confidence in it, and you're proud of it, you know, not just as a poetic piece, what he's saying within the text, but the confidence in where he's able to deliver it. And so for me, we always share that kinship. And then I think towards the end, he made more of a transition into music and a fine appreciation of music and rhythm. And at that time, I was doing the rapping stuff with Don. And I remember him saying like, yeah, you know, when I get a bit stronger, I want to do like something with music and blending music and poetry together. And I was like, yeah, man, that's gonna be sick, you know. So yeah, he's that guy, man, you know what I mean? Like,
you know, everyone says, oh, you can be what you want to be, but some people just say that. But for him, I feel like he just had so many talents and natural ability that he could go into any of these fields that we've just spoken about and absolutely kill it.
Yeah, it's crazy. This guy was a poet, like a fine poet, and
sick dancer.
Was
crazy basketball.
Bro, he got invited to play for Fulham.
Bro, it's mad.
And then decide, you know what I mean? This is the kind of guy he is, yeah? Man was playing for Fulham. And he was like, yeah, but I'd rather go to university.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
That's a different mindset.
Yeah, it's different, bro, because me, I'll be like, uni? So I'm about to secure this bag.
Listen, you don't get many Alexes. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you don't get any, and that's why, you know, when someone passes really young in it, a lot of the time there's a sense of like unfulfilled potential, and I know a lot of people feel like that with Alex, because you feel like he hadn't even hit his prime yet, like he was going towards his peak. But at the same time, you look at how much he achieved in his life, and you feel lazy.
He's prolific.
Yeah,
definitely
like,
prolific.
You look at the number of poems he was able to write, so much so that like Joe was able to publish a book out of it, and you think, raw, like as an artist or as a poet, how much am I writing? How much have I written? And if I was to go tomorrow, could somebody take the amount of work that I've done and make a publication out of it? You know, and then you've got things like speaking in front of the Conservative party about stop and search. And
do you know what? Yeah, I always say this to people. I'm not always a skeptic in it, but when people say things like, "Oh yeah, I want to be the next black president," or like the first black president of England,
Prime Minister.
Prime Minister of England. You kind of look at them like, all right then, bro. Do you know what I'm saying?
What did you smoke here?
Yeah. But when it came to Alex, yeah, nobody doubted it. Like when I say nobody, like when he said, yeah, I want to be the next black prime minister, everyone was just like, cool.
I can see it.
Yeah.
Do you know, I didn't even know he said it. I thought people were just saying to him, like, nominate him. You know,
see, bro, it's crazy. Like, when I say a life well lived, innit? Yes, it was cut short, innit? But a life well lived. That someone who poured passion into everything. That is the mantra for Alex. Like for Alexander, he just poured passion to everything. Like he was so happy. I even remember towards like the end of his life. Yeah, I remember him coming to church, and like he was on crutches, but the grin was just like so memorable. Like I remember speaking to him, and he's like, "Yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to get baptized." And I was like, "Yeah?" He's like, "Yeah, bro." And I was like, "You seem happy about this?" He's like, "Yeah, bro. I've never felt like this before in my life." We're talking about someone at the end stage, where normal people are like, "My bones hurt. I can't move." Do you know what I'm saying? Like he was just there, so
different,
like
man.
ever present. It's crazy, yeah.
I remember that day when he got baptized as well. I've never seen church that full.
No,
Yeah,
it was
same.
pack out.
Pack out.
Yeah, it was
Bro,
pack
to the
out.
rafters, man.
Yeah.
And like, it just speaks to what you were saying. One thing that my family always remembers about him as well. Again, he was like a brother to us. And when my older brother had his children 5 years ago, he was like the first friend outside the family to come and visit. This was when he was like very still ill and everything. He made the effort to come to the house and hold both of the babies in his arms. It's just those moments that he just really cared about people.
Yeah, he cared about people, and I remember this story. It's not my story to tell in it, so I won't tell it. But there was a person who went to prison in it, and he was saying that one of the only people who wrote to him regularly was Alex. You know, and that kind of compassion. Like sometimes I feel like we almost live in a little bit of an apathetic world where everything's about you be the best you can be. Yeah, that's cool, innit? But only focus on yourself, and you know, if somebody don't fit in your circle, like cut them out. And he embraced everybody. Like if you're a different faith, like don't matter, innit? If you had different politics, don't matter. If you come up from the streets, don't matter. If you came up from your parents are millionaires, don't matter. He just loved people. And I think it's a very rare quality to see nowadays.
Definitely.
So what I want to do now is one of the things that Alexander was known for is speaking at the Conservative Party about stop and search laws because he was having a hard time with it. And so with Priti Patel's new reformation of police powers, I wanted to get your views, both of you, on your experiences with stop and search laws and maybe where you think there is a room for growth.
Cool. I know it was something that Alexander was very, very passionate about. You know, had conversations with Theresa May about, you know, stop and search and how he felt it impacted ethnic minorities, and you know how there was kind of like a casting system about who you would stop and search and why. What was the need to stop and search? I think I've been stopped and searched loads of times. I think from about 15 to maybe 19, I was getting stop and search regularly. The time I got stop and search the most was to do with dance, which is expected, but
yes, because dancers dresses like hoodlums.
Well, I mean, for me, you know, we had bandanas hanging out of the pocket. Do you know what I'm saying? We had, you know, the jeans and the, you know, multicolored t-shirts. So
they thought you were Crips.
Yeah. They thought I was something in it, clearly. So I remember, I think the most times I got stop and searched in one day was like 5 times, and then someone was like, "Oh, you know, you can just show your slip." But we just used to throw the slips in the bin, innit? Like, why am I keeping a stop and search slip? So I just used to throw them in the bin. So the next time the police officer caught me, then there was another stop and search. I would just stop you and searching you. I think for me personally,
it's interesting that you said police officer caught me. Like, even though you're an innocent brother.
Yeah.
Like, you got that.
I was literally just about to say, you know, it's kind of embarrassing, isn't it? Like, when you get stop and search, because society don't think about what could be happening. They think about what they see, you know. And at the time, as a young black male, You're pulling me to the corner. You're singling me out from everybody. Like, I remember one time I got stopped and searched at Clapham Junction. Like, you know, over the footpath at the top. So everybody's coming towards their train, and I've been pulled to the side. And I remember asking the police officer, why have you stopped and searched me? He said you were heading towards me in an aggressive demeanour. And I said, sorry, wait, what?
That's everyone in London. I
was like, this is mad. And then he pulled me to the side and stopped and searched me. And then suddenly the lines of people got slower and people started turning their heads and looking at me. And I'm like, I'm not guilty. No one's put cuffs on me. No one's slapped me with cuffs. Nobody's done anything. This is a horrible feeling. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and sometimes it makes you think, oh, okay, let me do it to you, police officer, and let's see what people are saying. Take yourself out of your uniform, put yourself in a t-shirt and, you know, some 3/4 lengths, and let me stop and search you and, like, feel how it feels to be stopped and searched. Especially when you have very little grounds, you know, because a lot of the time it was like, oh, there's been a robbery in the area and the person fits your description. Yeah, you're in southeast London. I'm black and wearing school uniform. There's hell of us with short hair. Do you know how many people that fits in South London? Oh, well, there was a gang of 3 of them and there's 3 of you. How many people walk home in 3s? What kind of a description is this? Do you know what I'm saying?
Everything has to be a gang as well when it's young black boys. It's always that way.
So, you know, I think in terms of the laws and the way that they're moving, you know, in such a delicate time, innit, I feel like you can incite something. I think they really need to be careful because, you know, we have laws in place to protect us. But at this moment in time, people are extremely anxious. You know, they're extremely worried. We don't know, on a slight tangent, we don't know the effects that, you know, coming out of the Euro really has for us at this moment in time, because we've had kind of like catastrophe after catastrophe. So you've had, you know, COVID-19, you've had the war with Ukraine, you know, and Russia, you've had us stepping out of the Euro, you've had what's the pox now?
The what?
Monkeypox.
Monkeypox.
Oh, yeah, that one's going to happen.
So we've had a lot. You know, people have been in isolation. We've seen the effects of that in terms of mental health. And now when people are finally stepping out, what you're saying to them is that, oh, we're increasing grounds for stop and search. Like, you're creating something. Do you know what I'm saying? So that would be my view. I mean, we'll get into more of a discussion, but yeah.
I know.
Yeah, I've just got a lot of different thoughts around the subject. A lot of my friends and family have been negatively impacted by stop and search for as long as I can remember. I've personally had very little encounters with the police, which, you know, I might look at it in a fortunate light because it's not the norm for someone that looks like me. But then I'm also aware that there's certain expectations of how society expects us to carry ourselves. So it's like, okay, be polite to someone even if they're looking to give you a hard time, or oh, don't give someone a reason. You know, like a lot of African Americans, for example, have to have to talk with their children about when they're driving. It's like, oh, just keep your hands on the wheel, don't do this, don't do that. So I think about it in terms of, I've got a younger brother who's he's just turned 13 actually, and I worry about how his first encounter with the police is going to go, in terms of, if you have that, once you have that first interaction or first couple of interactions and it goes the same way all the time, you haven't done anything wrong, but you've been accused or stereotyped, it's just going to create a resentment that grows and grows. And then some people end up, unfortunately, succumbing to the expectation of what the environment expects of you.
Can I just ask, why do you think you in particular have had such little... I mean, I don't know if you can comment, but...
Chance, honestly, I don't know. I think I've always just had the mental. I was never really out and about, like on the road. Not that that should be a reason for someone to search you for no reason, but I was always just, and I'm still like that now. I have somewhere to go, I'll just go straight there, I'll come straight back. I love being at home. I'm a homebody, so there's just less chance of an encounter if I'm not there to be encountered. But then I don't know. Maybe also my stature. I feel like, you know, kind of how people try out the nightclub bouncer because they're someone big. So people tend to go for somebody that so they can diminish them or maybe emasculate. And I maybe just would never had that frame. So they don't see me in that sort of way. I can't speak for why someone else didn't decide to do that, but I guess it's just chance.
Like for me, I'm a bit like Don. So there was a period in my life where it was incessant stop and search. So for me, it was between the age of about 18 to 21, 22. And I feel like there was a lot more police presence. Especially when I was going to uni, because I used to go from Thornton Heath Station to Greenwich. And there seemed to be a lot more police activity around that time. And then when I was in college as well, they used to travel on the bus and in Croydon, like city centre, innit?
Yeah.
So often I was getting, can we talk to you? Can we talk to you? And of course, it builds up a resentment. I feel like, for me personally, I feel like the police have a really poor PR team. Like, and I know it's like, it's the police, what are you talking about PR? But it's like they don't understand optics. You know, they don't understand. So I was reading this article and it was talking about like the crime survey and people's trust in the police.
Yeah.
And it's gone from 62% to 55%. So people have less confidence in the police now. And I think that's been compounded by a lot of different things, like the Sarah Everard case. Yeah. Because obviously the perpetrator of that was the police. You've had the George Floyd incidents, which is interesting to me because there does seem to be a conflation between what happens in America and what happens here. And I feel like it needs to be separate in order for us to have an honest conversation, because as much as the police can be irritating in this country, they're not walking up on people and blaming them. Do you understand what I'm saying? And I feel like some people don't want to admit that, because then maybe it seems like the way that the police in this country have a stop and search is less severe, you know, or it takes something away for us not to be victims of violence, you know. But somebody aggressively like grabbing a 16 or 17-year-old, that's still aggressive, you know. Or you have 4 officers surrounding somebody who's like 17, or this new scandal where a young lady's made to get undressed in front of...
Oh, that was terrible, man.
You understand what I'm saying? And so it's like they have no semblance of what it looks like to the public. Like,
or even just like a level below, like, or above, however way you look at it, is what is it doing to the individual that you're doing this to?
Yeah, because it's like they're never going to trust you. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, your place is supposed to be in the community and making that community safe and preventing of crime. Because, to be honest, I can only speak for myself. I don't want to live near criminals. I had kids. So I want the police to do their job. But I don't want them to do it like that. Do you know what I'm saying? It's almost like, imagine you had somebody from BT who came to fit your broadband, and you found out that man was part of a rampant burglary gang. Do you want that man to come in your house and fit your BT?
No, of course not.
Exactly, you don't. So when you see these people and they're acting that way, or you hear these stories about police officers, you think they're incapable of policing. And it's a big perception problem. You know, you have somebody like Cressida Dick who comes out and says there's no issues with the Met Police Force when it comes to race. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, WhatsApp's our thing, and they're going around messages like, we want to M little black kids. We want to R-word women and assault them. And you're like,
what? Yeah.
Don't you have any awareness of your position in this country to serve the community?
A lot of people say that though. It's like, a lot of people say from our community say the police are their own gang, you know. So it's like, instead of coming out and admitting we have problems that we need to address and we need to work towards fixing them and build communities and relationships, it's sometimes seen as easier to just, you know, back your boy, essentially. It's like, okay, I'd rather it's us or them kind of mentality.
We're the ops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
know?
literally, yeah. Literally.
And look, I also want to say, I don't like the whole narrative of like, it's a tough job. So we get away with certain things, because if you were an airline and your pilots kept crashing, you couldn't just say, well, piloting is a really hard job.
Yeah.
You know, there needs to be some investigation. Why are your pilots crashing all the time?
Yeah.
You know, and so we need to have these conversations, but it's almost like you said, they're like their own institution, and they see like, and I kind of get it in a way, because you have civilians in a community, and any one of those civilians could be a criminal.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that all the civilians are criminals. And I feel like that's how the police operate, especially in certain areas of London. That most people who live here are most likely to be involved with crime. And if you treat people that way, you're going to get things like resentment. And the last point I'll make, because I've been talking for a minute, is I also think there's been a massive separation between the individuals who police and the individuals who live. So if you're from a small town, yeah, you can't go and rough up Arthur because his dad stands behind you at church.
Yeah.
You know, his mum is the person who runs the laundrette where your wife cleans her clothes. So there's a tight knit, like you're accountable because you're part of the community. Whereas I feel like, especially in London, I can't speak for any other places, there's this militaristic output where the police are strangers and they're policing people who they think are strangers, and there's no connection and there's no autonomy. So you can't say, yeah, bro, why are you doing this? Like, I'm going to see you at church on Sunday. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, they were so removed from one another that there's no accountability.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think for me, I don't know anymore, innit? I work with a service that relies on police support, you know, so I've been within like walking distance from a police officer. And I think sometimes when I'm trying to understand what their role is in society and how seriously they take that, and I think this is why people like Alexander are so important, to have these discussions around stop and search, but also around, you know, change in the community. Because, for example, we have a lady who's locked herself in a property. We need to gain access to the property. We, as social workers, can't kick down the door. We can't, you know. So we have to get the police. The police are like, I don't know, you know, this isn't really high priority. Sometimes you're like there for like 45 minutes to get a response. And then they're like, oh, we can only kick down the door if we assume that the person, you know, is, their life is threatened. And I'm saying, okay, so what do you want us to do? I would leave it to the social worker. Okay, but we can't kick down the door. This is breaking and entering. Like, what do you mean? Like, you know this is a criminal offence. Like, if you're a police officer, you know that's a criminal offence.
You gotta tell them there's a black boy in school uniform in there, right? They boot that down quick.
Yeah, so, you know, and then it's like, okay then. And then I was speaking to, like, Dad the other day, innit? And he was basically saying that, I was like, oh yeah, but loads of them are at the police station, at the train station, when there's like a Palace game. And he said, not really. And I said, what? And he's like, yeah, most of them are transport police. I said, sorry, what? I said, so all them bully vans just full of transport police vans, for those who don't know, are full of transport police. And he said, majority. He was like, trust me, if you ring the police station, he's like, you're not getting a lot of police officers coming up.
And this is another thing that I kind of want to touch on, because I think it's important to be honest in the conversation, innit? So a lot of police officers are overworked and underpaid, and there's not that many of them, which again increases the workload. So I remember when I was at university, there was a test. You had to have a visual acuity test, and you had to mark a certain eyesight. And it makes sense, because if a license plate is driving away, you want the police officer to be able to see the license plate for as long as possible and get the number. If somebody's running away from you, you want the arresting officer to be able to describe what that person looked like.
Yeah.
And recently, that visual acuity test has been removed so that they can have more police officers, because people are not signing up to be police officers.
So you can get Stevie Wonder chasing you down the road. No, it's a serious point you made.
I can't lie, no one needs to be a permanent fixture on this show.
But this is what I'm saying. So now, I'm not saying that the level of police officers has gone down. I don't know. I'm not in that thing to make that kind of assumption. But what I can tell you is some people who would have been denied entry for having poor eyesight may be accepted because they need the officers on the ground. And I feel like that's a problem. You know, you should pay these civil servants decent money so that, because the problem is, if you're somebody who crunches numbers for a living and you're sort of in despair about having to crunch numbers, well, it's you and your damn office and your damn numbers. But if you're a police officer and you grow apathetic in your role because you're not being paid enough, and it has a negative effect on the way that you interact with the community and your ability to do efficient and good policing in the neighborhood.
It's like having a bad teacher or an apathetic teacher.
Exactly.
It's just very damaging to like a wider number of people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, definitely.
So thank you, gentlemen, for the conversation. Yes, sir.
Hoping to see better days. I see destruction coming in different ways, but still I remain hopeful. Hoping to see better days. Longing to hear the laughter of the children, or hear the loud voice of an evangelical pastor. Surrounded by darkness, but light will soon penetrate and eradicate all the hate. But until that day, I continue to pray, hoping for better days.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back with Tyrell. Hello, Tyrell.
Hello, guys. Thanks for having me.
No problem. How are you?
I'm good, feeling good. The sun is out finally.
Tell me about it, man. So what we wanted to do is get your experience of Alexander and his life, and sort of what, if anything, it's taught you.
Well, it taught me so much. I'll start by saying it's so surreal that it's 5 years already since he passed away. You know, when I look in hindsight, we were really young. You know, it was about between 19 and 21 at the time, and he was just really ahead of his time in his, thought process, his perspective on things, and it just taught me a lot about love in friendship, brotherly love and stuff like that, and I feel like a lot of people weren't really on that wavelength so young. So we met just before we started uni, from what I remember, so probably around 2013, 2014, so just finishing college, just about to start university. We met on this leadership program, which was with, I believe, an organization called SEO, which is all about helping young people get into careers, different opportunities, more experiences. And we went to GBK in Waterloo, I remember. So the organization took us there, and everyone was sort of networking, meeting each other, becoming more acquainted. I think we had seen each other a few times, but we met formally there. And obviously exchanged details and stuff like that, kept in contact after that. And then from there, the friendship just blossomed really quickly. He would come to Birmingham, because I went to University of Birmingham, and he went to Warwick, obviously, which is in Coventry. So he would come to Birmingham sometimes, I would go to Warwick. And sometimes, particularly in my university, they'd have like sort of poet nights, open mic nights. So he would come and perform. So he was becoming more sort of acclaimed around my university as well, which was really good. I obviously went to his university as well to see him recite poetry.
What was he like in his university? Because I suppose that's a time that I didn't see him.
In university?
He was much younger.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, Alex was like, what can I say? Yeah, and physically, and in terms of who he was as a person, his body was so like toned, and it was big. He didn't even really go to the gym. He looked always used to look really healthy. Loved this planting. Would always come to uni and come to my uni and be like, "Do you have any planting?" Like, so we obviously make breakfast and stuff like that and lunch or whatever. But yeah, he was just a great guy, very athletic, as I said, for somebody that didn't really work out. Very kind, always waking up early. Would always send me like these morning messages, like "Morning King," like all these affirmations. Like getting into the patois, he was just the best. There's no one like him. Like literally, there's no one like him. And yeah, he was just very like always had a massive presence wherever he went. He really left a lasting impact on people, even if he had met them for the first time. Because there's a lot of people that obviously he met when he came to my university that obviously didn't know him, and they would remember him like, "Oh, has your friend Alex got any plans to come back?" and stuff like that, and want to know more about his poetry. Yeah, very like popular and leaving a lasting impact, which that's what life is about, really.
And I suppose he's always had that. I mean, even from my first interaction with Alexander was in church.
Yeah.
And I remember there wasn't nothing that you could say, "Oh, could I have a volunteer for?"
That he wouldn't put his hand up.
Alex was there, and sometimes you think, because I used to have this thing where I was like, not everybody needs to be on stage, innit? Like, you don't need to be at the pulpit. If you're good at making tea and coffee, just go make tea and coffee, innit? So when I saw Alex put his hand up all the time, I was like, right, is he going to pull this up? You think to yourself, like, poet, Alex is there. Acting, Alex is there. And you're thinking, you can't be as good an actor as you are at poetry. Yeah. That's where you got spun. Yeah. Because when Alex stepped on there, he was as good as anybody, and if he wasn't, like, he trained to be like.
Fam, I'm telling you,
he was that person. Like, he took everything so seriously. Like,
I remember,
he had the passion.
Because at that time, I was the kind of person who I like to make speeches. Yeah, so I had this reputation in the church for having quite witty speeches and stuff like that. And I remember Alex going on, and I was like. At the end, you look at the beginning. You're like, small fry, innit?
I told you,
yeah. And then, dang, I'm kind of sweating. This guy kind of good, And that's what I remember of him. Like, he was always pushing himself. He always looked for the best examples to raise his level as well. And I'm glad to hear that. Obviously, later on in life, he still kept that.
Never lost it.
Because a lot of people, like, that spark, it kind of, maybe they go through a negative experience or something like that, and it kind of fizzles away a little bit. But to hear he's larger than life at university, it's beautiful, man.
If anything, it probably intensified. Do you know what I mean? As he got older, because as I said, he was just always sort of charismatic, very in tune with other people and stuff like that. And I feel like it wasn't overbearing. It would always be considerate of others and try and encourage other people, towards their strengths.
Yeah.
Which, again, you don't always find that so young. I always look back, like, in hindsight, and I think we were really young, in the way that he behaved and stuff, and, the way he carried himself. It was very inspiring.
He's definitely beyond his years, because, I mean, we spoke about it. How many people have enough poetry at his
to fill a
age
book?
To fill a book,
exactly.
And that's just like the tip of the iceberg of some
I'm
of the stuff
telling you.
that he did. So definitely.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about the charity.
Yeah.
How that came about as well.
Yeah, definitely. So, I'm a mental health first aider and advocate, and Alex was always sort of encouraging young men to express themselves, especially black men. We have this issue and stigma in our culture where, a lot of the men don't express themselves. They don't seek help, and usually black people are usually seeking help, when it's at crisis point. So Alex was really aware of that again from young. He was always, I remember one time in uni, I think we was like walking back from my campus back to my accommodation, and he was like, putting his arms around me, and it was like, bro, tell me how much other man you're gonna see walking down the road like this. Like, they wouldn't do it, bro. Like, trust me, we're secure in ourselves. Like, this is what we need to encourage the man them to be. Like, just be themselves and not worry about, how you're perceived and, what culture, what society's telling you, stuff like that. And as I said, it was like 19 at the time, 19, 20. And you're like, rah, this guy's really informed. It really encouraged me to be more open with, you know, my male friends, you know, which encourages them to be more open. So the charity kind of came about through, you know, just thinking about how we can push his narrative even further now that he's, you know, unfortunately not with us anymore. And it's just about encouraging expression in young people, you know, whatever that looks like for you, you know, art form, dancing, poetry, like him, you know, talking. So many different ways we want to push that. And obviously we took a bit of a hiatus because obviously COVID came, there was issues with that, but we are still working behind the scenes. You know, we want to sort of have a proper relaunch eventually. Well, it takes time, it's hard work, but it's worth it, you know, and we don't want to let his legacy down, and it won't. It speaks for itself. Do you know what I mean?
Because it's interesting because I recently, shout out to Chia, innit? I recently was part of a documentary called When He's Vulnerable.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That sounds really good.
Yeah, and so it's very interesting that Alex had the focal insight. Do you know what I'm saying? Way back then. Because when she asked me to do it, I was like, what you talk about?
I know it's still something that's, you know, difficult to comprehend for some people,
And so, for someone so young to get it, I think it sums up a lot of who he was, because he saw people and he saw the vulnerability that comes with living life, you know, like not being able to achieve your dreams, or like you're hindering yourself through your own self-doubt, or you care so much about what other people think that you can't even have your own life, because you're like, oh, but if I do that, what will grandma think of me? If I do that, what will the man them think of me if I'm this way, you know? And so it is interesting that somebody can pick that up at a time where you're very hyper aware of it. Like, you know, I remember my dad he's a very eclectic collector of music. So he's got Buju Banton right next to Boyzone, you know? And growing up, I quite like Boyzone music, But do you think I would tell people that? Be like, no
See,
way.
this is the thing.
You know, and so, but as a writer, it helped me understand music. I know they did a lot of covers, but it allowed me to understand pop music, you know, and how pop music is structured, why pop music sticks in your head so much, even though you don't want it to, and learning the layers, you know. And I think that's part of being a human being as well, because you meet somebody who's maybe not from your area, and your immediate thing is to dismiss them, to try and find the differences, you know. And Alex never did that, you know. And
I feel like this is gonna be so random, but you know how I am anyway. You know, like if you're a tea drinker, I spoke to one of my friends, absolutely hates tea, he was like, it's a waste of time. You boil the kettle, you put the tea bag in, you put the sugar in, long. You wait for it to brew, you put the milk in, you know, you go off and you do something, and the tea's cold, innit? And you have to dash out the cold tea, innit? He hates tea, innit? But the analogy, the reason why I said that is I feel like Alexander was tea at the perfect temperature all the time. It's like he knew when to like push you in terms of like competing. Like he'll tell you, I'm better than you. And you'll be like, nah, bro. He'll be like, let's sort it out, let's see it, innit? Like, and he was so geared up for the challenge, innit? But he knew when to hold back and say, actually, bro, like, this is your time to shine. Like, do your thing. And you're just like, raw, what? Like, you're like, seriously? Like, because we were just going back and forth. Like, we could go back and forth again. You're like, no, you know what? It's your center stage. You can do it. You're just like, raw. And then to hear, like, he was so in touch with, like, males expressing themselves, like, black males expressing themselves. And then to see the poetry, and actually some of Alexander's poetry, I don't know like how many people have got the book, but some of it goes through a turbulent time where you can see that he's finding himself. But it never changed how he approached other people. Like he was going through his journey, but he always made time for other people's journey. And it's like, wait, how? And we're talking about what, like an 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old, like some of the titles, like some of the poetry is untitled. You know, I had the fortunate opportunity to read Does Heaven Have a Ghetto in it? And I'm probably gonna read it, like part of it for the podcast. And I remember just looking at it thinking, right, you're thinking about this? I think it was written in something like, don't quote me in it, I'll probably put the date in the thing, but I think it was something like 2010. And I'm just like, the thoughts that this guy is having, what? This is crazy. You know, and so it's funny, like, speaking about him just brings me so much joy. Like, to know that someone had such a lasting legacy, like, in church. You mentioned Alexander, like, it goes off. With his friends, you mentioned Alexander, it goes off. And he was around many successful people, you know, who still live on his legacy today. Like, they could have dropped it because the stuff that they're doing, crazy. But, you know, when you say Alexander to them, even though you're a friend of Alexander, you may not even know the person. When you say Alexander to them, it's like a whole new world opens up. They're like, oh, you knew Alex? You're just like, yeah. It's like conversation starter. Like, guy, bro, I can't even put into words. Like, it's sad that he left us, but I don't think people would have truly appreciated who Alexander was until a time when you don't have him. You know, like people say, like, you have to have pain to experience like the good times and all the rest of it. Like, his legacy, like, when you actually sit down, you have a moment and you're trying to comprehend it, and you're talking to people and you're like, this was a life well lived, and people are like, how? And then you start to draw out the things, you're like, this is something different. Do you know what I'm saying? This is something different, 100%.
Tyrell, I just wanted to ask you, do you have like a moment or a close memory of him that you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's quite a few. Some of them are so, they might seem so small, but it was really significant. I feel like he was just wisdom personified. Like, literally, sometimes you're there talking to him, have to be drawing for the dictionary. I won't lie, to be drawing for the dictionary. Like, he was so, like, just so amazing, so insightful. And, you know what else though? He was very hard on himself as well. Really hard on himself, and, you know, self-doubt was there, and typical stuff when you're coming of age, really and truly. But, you know, he was so amazing and would pour into other people, but he was really hard on himself, felt like he wasn't doing enough, you know, career-wise, academically, you know, even in his personal relationships, he felt like he wasn't, you know, enough for certain people that was around him. And I always used to be like, what are you talking about? Do you get what I mean? But loads of things. I mean, in my first year of university, unfortunately, I was in a car accident. So I was bedridden for a good couple months, pushing a year. Wow. He would come to Birmingham from his uni and visit, you know, those kind of times. I remember one time I went to Warwick for something. I don't remember what it was, but I ended up staying with him. And when I was leaving to go back to Birmingham, he was like, I can't remember what happened. I think someone called him or something whilst my bus came. So we didn't get to say bye properly. Obviously, we saw each other saying bye or whatever. And afterwards, he called me and was like, bro, I'm so sorry I didn't get to embrace you properly. Like, do you know what I mean? I was just thinking, like, what kind of amazing somebody is this? Like, do you know what I mean? Who says that? Like, who actually says that? Like, 19, 20. Who even says that now? Do you know what I mean? When the man them see each other, do you know what I mean? When the man them see each other, we're spudding, or we might do the handshake one, but he used to proper hug me. Like, I feel like he probably encouraged me to do that, because now I do that with my male friends, especially if I haven't seen them for a long time. But he used to proper hug you. Like, do you know what I mean? Just little stuff like if I said to him, oh, I got this internship, like, paragraphs of like, I'm so proud of you, and yes, king, and all this stuff. Like, he was just so affirming, and you just don't even know that you need that at that age. You actually don't know. That's like, you know what I mean? He even when he was ill, even when he was ill and stuff, after he collapsed and everything, and was in hospital and stuff like that, he was still the same. Like, the messages, and what a guy.
I got a long message and I was like,
what a guy.
How are you even writing? Do you know, like in church they do the updates and everything, and they're like, oh, you know, he's really ill. And then I sent him a message and he's like, oh, sorry, King, my phone's been off, bro. Like, I'm really sorry. But I'm like, you're sorry.
That's what I'm saying.
Like, what?
He was the best. And you saw the legacy and impact when he passed, you know. No, not when he passed away, when he was really ill. And, you know, we eventually done the fundraising for treatment.
Yeah,
I have,
that.
they talk, there's negatives of everything with social media, but that was the most positive experience I have had on social media. Do you know what I mean? Like,
50,000, isn't it?
yeah, the campaign,
Like, people were, I was like, this ain't real.
the
Do you know what I'm saying?
campaign was massive, and it wasn't even just about the amount. Obviously, the amount was significant, but it was just about people were coming together. They were sharing it. They were liking it. They were talking. They were so together.
Yeah.
Even people that didn't know him were coming together with people that did know him. It was just a really amazing time. Like, people were like, oh my gosh, you know him too.
Yeah,
those kind of
that's
moments,
right.
it brought people together. Do you get what I mean? So for me, that was like the epitome of this is significant and people know that. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, no, definitely.
So Tyrell, thank you for taking the time to share that with
Thanks for having me.
us. No problem. Thanks.
So this poem is called Unappreciated Skin, Unappreciated Features. His skin was the colour of the darkest coal. He saw being black as something to be abused. Pain and anger were engraved on his soul. He looks down at his hands, and he was never enthused. His curly, kinky hair was always hard to comb, and this was all because he was black. He felt caged, and there was no place to roam. He felt his skin was meant to be under attack. He called his thick lips those slugs under his nose. His nose was that fat tube stuck on his face. These things always got in the way. They seemed to impose. They were a sign of ugliness, a sign of disgrace. He thought his skin kept him behind. He felt it made him subjugated. The type of skin you would not confide in. He always felt he was unappreciated. But he did not realize his black beauty. He chose to abuse and hate himself. The black nation has overcome cruelty, but he is oblivious to his natural wealth. He believes his skin stops his dreams from being in reach. So he hides and tries to shelter himself from all. He has now damaged his beauty due to bleach. But he did not know being black is beautiful. They say the darker the berry, the sweeter the juice, and the darker the skin, the deeper the roots. So don't let no one tell you black isn't beautiful. Your skin belongs to you, so make sure you feel comfortable. And that was on the 8th of October 2010.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and we are back with Jo, Alexander's mum.
Hi.
Hi, thank you for opening up your home for us to do this.
You're welcome. Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Really appreciate it. So, I think maybe the best place for me to start is what does Alexander's life mean to you?
Well, he was always a very, very special person to me. I had him much later in life. I was once labelled a geriatric mum. That was when I lived in Wales, and when he was born, ladies in their 30s having their first child. He was always very special, being my first child, and from an early age I noticed he was quite a gifted and he picked things up very quickly, and he was always very inquiring, the questions, doing things. So yeah, from an early age, Alexander had this sort of special thing about him. He was very loving as a child, and I think that followed him through his life as well. He loved people, he was an encourager, and he cared about people, and we got on really well. And because being the oldest child that I had, he was very mature and took on that sort of brotherly, fatherly figure to Lamar, who was very quiet and totally in contrast to personalities to his older brother. But yeah, Alex was always very special. And as he got older in his teenage years, we could sit and talk about almost anything. So he became a friend, but there was always that boundary that he knew, yes, I'm mum, you know?
Yeah.
So, okay, mum. And sometimes, being the person that he was, and, if he wanted to either correct you or, sometimes you had to remind him, yes, okay, Alexander, I know you've got all the info, but, there's a way of putting it forward. And he was very mindful of that. And, and also he made me feel that I was a queen. If people knew Alexander, all the women were queens, and he just, as I say, big you up, you know. So that was really good. Yeah, he was a special child.
No, that's good. I always forget that, like, he was born in Wales.
Yeah.
I think they tried to forget that as well. We're not Welshmen, Mum, but yeah, they were both born. I studied and did my training as a lawyer in Wales and met their father in Wales. And their early years was in Wales. And he came to London about 2.5.
Okay.
And then we found Chatsworth, which is where a lot of where he knew you guys. A lot of the people developed a lot of relationships through that church.
I wanted to ask, how did he take on education? Because he comes across as somebody who's very gifted, but what was the education process like for him? I mean, I know you can't speak for him, but how do you think he found it?
From the age of about 3, 4, he had this notebook and he would write stories. So he was always writing things. So, you know, his love of poetry made him sort of seek out stories. He was always inquiring about things. And Alexander just read from a young age. He was an avid reader. And, you know, there came a time in our life when I realised that, wow, he probably knows a lot more than me about certain things, you know?
Yeah.
Because he would read around almost everything. He was into culture, into Pan-Africanism, into history, Machiavelli, the Dark Ages. He was into almost anything. And very curious mind. And, you know, at school, he did quite well at school. He was very competitive in almost everything that he did. You lot probably knew that, you know. Yeah, as a sports person, he had to win. As playing basketball, he hated if he lost. And, you know, I used to expose my boys to things like the racket sports. We played tennis, squash. And, you know, Alex had to beat you, even if he didn't have the skills. And I had the years of training, but because he was agile and he was quick, Mum, I've got to beat you. You can't beat me. So that's the kind of person he was. And even with his education, you know, I sent him to a boys' school and he wasn't happy with that.
Yes.
And as soon as he was, you know, going into the sixth form, he made it clear that he didn't want to stay on. And he went to a sixth form college where he studied with girls, and he really flourished because he found girls that he could open up with the girls, and he was competitive as well. He said, Mum, they can't be better than me. I've got to get better results than them. So that was the kind of person that he was as well.
Yeah.
And you know what's interesting? When we spoke to Tyrell, he spoke about how much Alex embraced black males and let them know it's kind of natural to be themselves and that they didn't have to hide anything. You know, he allowed them to be expressive and emotional. So it's funny that maybe that's, obviously we can't speak for him, but maybe that's what he felt like he was always missing going, because as someone, I went to an all boys primary school, but I went to a mixed secondary school.
I did.
Yeah, I know you did. and I suppose there really is that polar opposite where it's like, especially as a black male, you have to hold yourself in a certain way. You know, you can't let anybody think that if they challenge you, they're going to be able to get away with it. And so, you know, it's interesting that he seeked out that kind of emotional attachment to say, actually, this is normal.
Yeah. In fact, there was one of his poems, I can't remember what it's called, but he was talking about channeling that energy into love rather than battle. You know, young boys should not really be fighting each other, and he wrote poems about getting your education, and you know, some of the romantic poems about channeling that emotion into relationships rather than all the testosterone going around and wanting to fight with everybody, you know. Yeah.
And it was crazy that we've spoken about this so much, but some of the poetry that he wrote, he was quite a young mind, you know. Some people don't even have those thoughts in their 30s, you know, 35, 40, and they're still wrestling with that. And for him to have those thoughts and be able to document them in poetry, to me, every time I read one of his poems, I'm just astounded by how much he was able to pour into the poem. Yeah. Because you finish reading it and you're just like, wow.
Where did that come from?
Yeah.
He, from a young age, he was very emotional. You know, sometimes he had to learn to control that temper. You know, he had a lot of passion in him. And as he got older, he matured with his emotions. But, you know, because there was one poem I was reading a couple of days ago, I think it was the chicken one, and he loved his chicken. You know, yeah, Mum, you can take my chips, you can take my sweets, but leave my chicken leg, leave my chicken. And he wrote this poem, and it was sort of like he was likening it. It was sort of like, you know, it's telling the story of how the chicken is so succulent, and you could see these connotations of a young boy sort of coming into his early teens, you know, discovering women, and using that analogy of you know, the tenderness that a boy has for his first girlfriend, but that was the chicken, you know. And I thought that was really good.
What,
you know,
what if anything do you feel like you learnt from reading some of his poetry?
It was hard. I knew Alex was a poet, and I went and supported him when he started doing spoken word.
Sure.
Spoken word is obviously different to writing poetry, and he was very good. You could see him putting the expressions and everything. But he had this book, and he used to say, Mum, I'm not. I say, well, Alex, you're really good. Why don't you publish your things? No, I don't want anyone to see them. No, I'm not ready yet. And the majority of poems I didn't know. When he passed, I came across two big lever arch A4 books of poetry. Some of them are in the book, Climbing Clouds. But there's still a lot that didn't make the book. And what surprised me was the depth of his emotions, and it's clear that at some stage he went through a deep sort of depression and hid it. And I remember he did say that to me when he was unwell. He said, Mum, if I got through depression and nobody knew, I can get through this. Wow. He really was determined to overcome the tumour. And that surprised me, and I was saddened because there was a time when he was about 15, 16, and we had lost my mother. He was very close to my mother. And so I put a lot of those emotions down to the grief of losing a very dear and special grandmother. But I think reading the poems and reflecting now on things that he said over the years, speaking to other people and just looking back on life, he probably was depressed and probably went through a period where maybe now they would put labels on it and maybe get some therapy, I don't know. But he channeled all his emotions into writing. And I think that's where you could see him developing through the poetry. So at one stage, I questioned myself, well, why didn't I see it? But then there's so many people in life. I remember sharing with Alexander once, and I was talking about he was a comedian, Robin Williams. I don't know if you... And how he seemed to have everything, and he was funny, and he had a life, and he had a family around him. Always smiling. But he was depressed to the point where he took his life. I don't think Alexander was there, but that was one thing that surprised me after he'd gone. And then also how much he had helped people. That came out really when he was unwell. You know, even after he passed, I went to the graveside. I used to go there almost, it was hard at first. And there was a letter on the graveside, and a young lady had left a letter how Alexander had helped her, and she'd shared certain things with him that she hadn't revealed, some abuse, and how he stopped her from taking her life. And I thought that was really deep, you know. And he also used to talk about how, I think you mentioned earlier, a lot of men don't open up, boys don't open up about their feelings, and they repress their feelings, and either they join a gang, or it comes out in real negative ways. And he wanted, and that was one of the reasons why he wanted to set up a charity with some of his friends to help young people to express themselves. And you know, we put a lot of energy into getting the charity up and running and registered, and then COVID came along and life comes along, and I have to admit it's on hold at the moment, and there's a lot of things that maybe we could go forward, but I think everyone's still trying to get over the last 2 years of life, you know.
Yes, yeah, because
It's been eventful.
Yeah, to say the least.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah. One thing that I did want to talk to you about is the
internship.
Yeah, the intern.
10,000
That's right.
interns,
Yeah.
Oh right, yes, the Black Intern Alexander Paul Award, how that came about.
Yes.
And again, it was just Alexander being Alexander. He was very popular at Warwick, and he had a friend who became a journalist, and she did an article. I think at the time she was working for the Bloomberg Group. I'm not sure if she's still there. And her father, I suppose she was talking to her father about this special person, Alexander, who'd passed on. And her father just... he was moved by the story, and he read and did a bit of research on Alexander, and he worked in the city, or I think he still works in the city, and he said that he'd always wanted to do things for young black people because he could see that they were unrepresented in that that circle, in the city circle. And so he contacted me and asked if I would mind them using Alexander's name for this award and this procedure that they're going to set up, where they would approach, I think it started off in city firms in a certain radius, but I think the project has been spread wider, and they started off just approaching the city firms to put forward interns that they felt had stood out, that was special and had certain qualities, and the qualities were matched up with what they felt that Alexander was about, inspirational, courage to speak their mind. The very fact that when he was 18, just before he went off to Warwick University, he stood up in the Conservative Party conference in front of thousands of people and said, look, you need to address the abuse of police stop and search policy. So, I agreed. And the first year, which was last year, I think they had over 100, quite a lot of firms that got involved and put forward people. And he sort of encouraged me to get involved in the process. And I was sent the names of the people that they'd whittled down. I think it whittled down to about 25 people, something like that. And then we had to choose the best 6, and then they went on to narrow it down. And a young female one, and she was really, really good. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend the ceremony. The award ceremony was at Downing Street, and at that stage, I was in Nigeria for a wedding, but I was linked up through the Zoom process.
Right.
So yeah,
I think Boris Johnson commented on Twitter. I think he attended as well.
Boris was the one who gave the award. Yeah, and so I did a little recording, and Boris gave the award, and I thought that was really good that he took his time out of his schedule to acknowledge the need that the city needs to be more inclusive. In fact, all the areas, we are seeing black people rising in so many other areas, people of colour, in medicine. I'm a lawyer, there's very well represented in law, social work. But the city, that enclave seems to be sort of for a long time, it was, nope, that's for certain people, not just black people or people of colour, but also working class people. We need to break down these barriers. And I think if Alexander was alive, that's what he would be pushing for, equality. And, you can do whatever you feel that you can do, and trying to encourage people to go ahead and you know, achieve what they want to achieve, irrespective of the barriers. So yeah.
Because he had this uncanny way of seeing the human being. Like, I know, especially now, maybe it seems like things are very tribal. It's like if you make a declaration, it's an intent of your political affiliations. And I think just being around somebody who was able to see the human in a person, you know, okay, yeah, so you're a Muslim, okay, but I'm seeing you, you know, I think it's a very, very special quality.
Yeah, he was, I mean, Alexander was friends to everybody, Muslims, Christians, black, white, men, women, boys, girls. He just loved people. And, you know, that was his passion for unity and to address injustice and bring us all together. And it's something that, I suppose many years ago as a young person, I wanted to get into law because I'm going to help people. And, you know, I did family law and to a certain extent I did, but I was never a political person in the way that Alexander was. But I feel that I've become more so since he has passed on. And there's a lot of things that, you know, you see in society, you feel that you need to speak out and have your views, but also taken on board that people see, we could see it one way, people see it another
way,
you know, and Alexander was like that. I couldn't say whether he was on the right or on the left, you know, and when he spoke at the Conservative Party, he was saying, but Mum, they want me to join, but I don't know if I don't think I'm a Conservative, but then I don't think I'm Labour. And I said, Alex, you're 18, you're working out your politics. And a lot of people don't know where they stand at that stage.
That's
you know?
And I think it's great. I've always found it a bit strange that people have this allegiance to one party, because if I look at myself, there are things that I'm very right wing about, and there are things that I'm quite left about. And so I always thought it weird, like, that we had to declare. Now, obviously, election time, you take a look at who most is going to improve living conditions and things like that. You never really know, but I just think it was weird where, I'm a lifelong Conservative. Like, have you not had a thought? You know, you know what I mean? Like, so it's always interesting.
Yeah, and at that stage, 18, you just come out of school, you don't really know much about life.
That's right.
But he knew that he was passionate about the stop and search. You know, growing up in Gypsy Hill, almost every week my boys were stopped. And, you know, so he had a passion, and that's what he said. He said, it's not that because people saw him as a Conservative because he spoke at their conference.
Right.
But he spoke at their conference because they were the party in power who were addressing the need to bring about changes.
Sure.
And credit to Theresa May, they did. But with the knife crime increasing and, you know, I still have a big question mark as to whether increasing more powers and putting police on the streets is the way to go forward, because the statistics is not showing that it's stopping the knife crime. In fact, it just keeps going up and up, and it is there is always that possibility that one or two may abuse. You know, we've seen recently with Child Q and the way that the police go about certain things. You know, they talk about this adultification of young children, but you go into schools and you know that a child is 14, 15. And you know that if you're going to strip search her, they should have an appropriate adult, you know. The police know that. But, you know, so there's a lot of things that we still need to address. And I'm sure if Alexander was here, he'd be, Mum, did you hear about that case? No, this is not, you know, you know how he was.
That's beautiful. I also wanted to get your views on, because you wrote a song.
Oh
as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
And so, what was that process like for you? Because
I've always sort of sing in the worship team, or you know, play the guitar and play the piano. But everything I did was either self-taught, and I dabble, and I'd never really pushed myself further. But I'd always said to Alex, I want to be a singer-songwriter. One of these days, I'm going to have a number one song. Yes, Mum. You know, Alexander was the greatest encourager,
of course,
and he did believe in me. And there was a song we used to sing at church, and I think I introduced that song. And It's called Through It All by the late, great Andre Crouch. Those people into gospel music would know that Andre Crouch, he wrote Soon and Very Soon and all the big gospel. And we were singing it for a bit at church. And then someone was singing the song with a reggae beat, and I was playing it in the car. And he said, Mum, did you allow that person to sing your song? And that's when and he thought all along that I'd written that song. I said, Alex, this is not my song. But he said, but Mum, you always want to write and you can do it. And he always encouraged me. And just before he got sick in the March of 2016, he bought me a book, 6 Steps to Successful Songwriting. And that was my birthday present. And he wrote in it, Mum, you can do this, go ahead. And so it was encouraging. And when he passed, it's amazing. When you lose somebody, you find that strength and energy to just do and pursue your dreams. And that's what I did. I decided. It just turned out that I wrote a tribute song for Alexander, but I'd written a few songs, but they'd just been left there. Right. But then I had the courage to get, one of the music people, Fernando from church, and he helped me put it together. And it was amazing. Some of the girls came and sang on it. And it was just to see it develop and then to see it released. And it wasn't, wow, I've written a song and this, it's amazing. It's hard to explain, but everything that I did in the last 5 years since he's passed is to Alex's memory and credit. And I found myself going and reading his poems and doing book promotion and doing so many things, not because I want to be a public figure, all my life I've sort of been in the background, but it was about this person that I'd lost. And then they got a stage in life where it all came crashing, I've got to do this. I had tunnel vision, my son wasn't able to release his book. I'm going to release the book. I don't care if I'm burning the midnight oil, this is going to happen. And then eventually grief gets to you and you have to take that time out. And I think that's where I've been in the last year, or COVID in particular. I started slowing down and then COVID came. And it gave me a chance to really grieve and slow down. And for a long time, I couldn't get up in public. I just lost a lot of confidence. But coming up to his 5-year anniversary, that's why I wanted to do something like this and just promote the book again. Just let people aware that it's still there if they want to buy it, if they haven't got it. And just to do something in his memory. And I feel that, probably after this, a lot of the young people, we're all getting on with our lives. He will be a memory for some, but he'll always be there for me. But life goes on. And so I feel that this is the last time to say, right, okay, Alexander, I'm taking your legacy and I'm running with it. But I've also got my own life to live and I need to get on with that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, your commitment to the cause is just breathtaking. Like I say to my mum all the time, it's just amazing to see what you've been able to achieve and do for Alex after his passing. I commend you so much, because in a way you see the determination and drive that he had.
I was literally just about to say that.
Coming through in the things that you've done for him, and so I wanted to publicly just commend you for it.
Thank you. I think that's just a mother's love, and something I said to a friend once. When you have a child, every year they have a birthday. You watch them with their girlfriends, you watch them get married, you watch them have children. My youngest is now, I'm a grandmother now, and that's amazing. And I'm watching him grow. He's just recently had his first boxing match and, and he's doing well. But Alex, at 21, everything stopped. And so it was just investing. If it means once a year, I talk about the book, I talk about Alex. That's like once a year. Because when you've got your children with you all the time, they're coming to visit you every week. You're seeing them grow. So you take that for granted. So sometimes people not many people have, but you do get the feeling sometimes that people say, well, you should let it rest now. But he's my son and he'll always be my son. And he's not here physically, but he's here in spirit. So going to see him every month, laying flowers on, that is something that I just have to do. And I think parents, mothers and fathers who've lost a child understand. We talk and they get it. But until you're in that, you're in that shoes and that, that position, it's hard to understand.
Sure. His legacy is definitely prolific. Like anybody, I was saying previously, sometimes you don't even know a person, and then it's like, oh, Alexander, and then that's the spark, and you're just like, it's like he pulled out so much that you know, for the people who do know him and for the people who do kind of investigate his story, they will just see, you know, he literally is everything. Like, so.
It's like someone was telling me, someone I know who knew Alexander very well, was telling me how a close friend of theirs got involved in the Black in Turn award, and then they realised Alexander Paul, you know, he's out there. And even before the Black in Turn award, the year that he passed, he was in the second year. So when the final year of graduation, when all his contemporaries were going through, they invited me. I went to the graduation service, and they gave him, it wasn't an honorary degree, but they gave a recognition of his contribution. But they also set up, the politics department set up an award. So there was an Alexander Paul Award for the best political student. And that was in honour of him and recognising his contributions to the Warwick University. So, you know, those things do make me proud. And yes, his life was short. And it's funny because if you go through the book and read some of his poems, it's as if he had a premonition that life was not going to be long for him. And people said he did so much in his short period of time. But maybe that's it. Sometimes some people know, I'm not going to be here long, so I'll cram this and I'll do that. And he did fit in a lot of things.
Absolutely, So Joe, I want to thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
No problem. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Angel of Death by Alexander Paul, dated the 18th of December 2010. The silhouette of my shadow is creeping up on me, showing me time is of the essence. I can feel her presence, the angel of death. She is waiting to strike. I shall die before my time. I should die due to my beliefs. But can I be saved, or am I in too deep? Time is running out, and my shadow is getting closer. There is no time for me to cry, because we are all destined to die. I don't know when I'll exhale my last breath, but am I ready for my untimely death?
You were climbing the clouds, you were catching the comets. You reached for the stars, and you got to the summit. With your love and hope, you inspired all to great heights. To always try and hope, and never give up the fight. You were climbing the clouds, you were catching the comets. With your love.